Have you ever wanted to build a computer but you can't because you're stupid, broke, and don't have a job? Well, lucky for you, with these 4 steps you can easily build a gaming PC. First things first is to call up your friend. Let me just hit him up real quick. How the hell did you get here so quick?
Oh, fast travel. Anyways, you said you needed help, right?
Precisely. Let's go over the steps. Step number 2. We'll infiltrate OEM companies and steal their computers. Step 3. Assemble all the parts together and build our supercomputer.
Sounds like the perfect plan.
Alright, Zephanox, after 6 hours of fleeing the police and destroying companies, we finally built our supercomputer. You ready to turn it on?
Let's do it.
3, 2, 1.
Why didn't it turn on?
Here, wait, let me try again. Finally, we can do some gaming. Now, in order to build our computer, we have to keep note of every part we're going to need. That being a CPU, GPU, motherboard, power supply, fans, and any other peripherals. But the big problem here is that I'm broke, and I can't afford any of these fancy computer parts on the internet. But what I can do is rip and tear through other computers until I have enough parts to build one. Although most of my computers are OEM, so this might be a little difficult. And this is due to OEM companies using weird proprietary cables only specifically used in certain Optiplex models. This means that certain cables and Optiplexes cannot be used for other computers. Now that I've covered every part of the computer, let's...
Wydaje mi się, że zapominasz o obudowie na komputer.
Ah shit, the case. I guess I'll have to build one.
A to nie byłoby dość skomplikowane?
Nah, it'll be easy. Now, taking apart this computer wasn't all that difficult. I had to be really careful about how rough I was with certain parts in order not to break anything. I had around 6 or 7 computers that I planned to take apart. Until I saw this Dell computer that I used in the Windows Vista video, it seemed like the perfect fit for a decent computer. The computer consisted of a 600 watt power supply, a 4th gen i7, 2 RAM slots that take DDR3, and a PCIe slot that I could put any GPU into. Although I want to use a decent GPU to run some pretty heavy games on this machine. I also made sure to take out this back fan so when I do build my case, I'll have some decent airflow going through. But now the entire computer is taken apart, let's get started on building our case. Now, building a case seems simple on paper, but in reality, it's not. When you build a case, there are a few things you need to take account for. Number 1 being structure. Now, this isn't too much of a problem. The motherboard is mostly going to be sitting in place, but if the motherboard moves too much, we could risk shorting it. Number 2. Heat. Now, usually most PC cases are made out of steel or aluminum, also using glass to protect the parts. But in this case, we have none of those materials. So with cardboard, we have to be a little bit more careful because it doesn't dissipate heat, it only traps it. So when we do make this case, we have to make sure that most heat is getting exhausted out. And trapping too much heat can possibly fry parts. Number 3. Airflow. The airflow in our case is important because it's basically how air will travel through our computer. We'll also want to make sure that our fan is in a good spot to exhaust hot air. Now for this concept, I cut a hole in this piece of cardboard to see if the fan and the wire would fit through, and it did. I'll most likely put the fan on the side of the computer next to the CPU so it exhausts most of the hot air coming out of it. Anyways, now that I'm done explaining that, it's time I show you guys the design I went for. The most original, never seen before case ever. A rectangular case. Okay, in my defense, I'm really not that creative. Now, going with this case design was either the dumbest or smartest choice I've ever made. And that's because trying to find all the type of ways to get all these external parts to connect was just way too difficult. The power button literally stretches across the case just to be connected. But hey, realistically, this is my first time building a case and building a computer together. I also had this really cool idea to put the USB ports into the hand holes of the cardboard, but the holes were too big. Now, the GPU I picked for this build is an RX 570. Luckily, our RX 570 model actually has 8 gigabytes of VRAM, which is insanely good for our build. Though making the cutout for the GPU was somehow difficult because every time I pushed the GPU through, it would just grow in size somehow. But after some trial and error, the GPU finally made it in and it looks beautiful. And now I decide to add a few finishing touches, and from now, I vanish.
Hey, shouldn't you be working on the video?
Ah, yes, the video. I'll get to it later. after my long and totally deserved 2-week break, I'm back and I'm ready to finish this computer. Now we left off adding some finishing touches to the side of the computer, but then I realized that I don't even have enough space to even set up the computer, especially with the power supply being all over the place. So I switched desks and then I had to set up everything again. For the monitor, we're still using the same old monitor I used in every other video. As for power management, we're gonna have to put a UPS under the desk in order to power everything on. With that out of the way, I think it's time we test out the computer and see if it even works. Wow, even after 2 weeks, I'm surprised this thing even turns on. Also, for some reason, the text here is in Russian. I don't know why. Anyways, I don't want to bore you guys any longer. It's time for a time lapse. This thing is beautiful. Now for the operating system, I couldn't decide which one to pick, so instead I spun a wheel and whoever's name it landed on gets to choose. Now I asked the winner what operating system he wants me to install, and he said Windows 7. Now let's install this operating system. I'm not gonna lie, Windows 7 is probably the most perfect operating system to install. And that's because Windows 7 still supports modern day apps such as Steam, Discord, Firefox, Spotify, you name it. And the best part of it all is that the RX 570 actually still supports Windows 7. Anyways, enough of that, let's install. As we make it to the desktop, I low-key kinda like how Windows 7 looks on 800 by 600 resolution. Now before I installed Windows 7, I made sure to get a USB with every driver and every update I needed to get this to work. Something everybody should know before installing drivers on Windows 7 is to always update your system. There is around 3 updates that need to be installed before installing drivers in order not to get signature errors like this. But even though I updated Windows 7 twice, I somehow still got a driver error. Somehow I was still able to install the driver even though I got like 4 signature errors, and from that I finally got to enable the arrow effects. And as usual, the goat of all browsers, aka Firefox, somehow still supports Windows 7 to this day. Now the next thing I wanted to get to work was Steam, and I thought that if I were to install an older version of Steam on Windows 7 it'd probably just work off the rip, and somehow it just kinda did. As usual, we always test out Peggle every time we install an operating system, but today, let's test out Pego. Yeah, apparently there's a lot of weird versions of Peggle out there. There's even a version on a flip phone. Anyways, I think it's time we test out a more graphic heavy game, Goat Simulator. Oh my god! Surprisingly enough, Goat Simulator runs pretty well on this machine. There are some moments where the GPU fans start to spin a little fast, but that's pretty normal. I just find it so funny how the smallest actions in this game quite literally flings you across the map. Holy shit! Alright, I think it's time we stop torturing the little goat and play an even more graphic heavy game. Black Ops 3. Not even a minute in and the resolution for this game is somehow fucked. Although after tweaking with the settings for a little bit, I actually found a resolution that fits this monitor. By the way, peak the perkaholics. As for the performance and gameplay, it honestly ran pretty well and it was smooth. Although when I checked our temps, the CPU was at a blazing 70 Celsius. Now it's not the hottest, but you can kind of tell the CPU is bottlenecking a bit, even though I did change the thermal paste beforehand too. But I really can't complain much because I still had fun playing on this computer. And as for online play, I actually didn't experience any connection issues. In fact, it was probably the most smooth gameplay I've had in a long time. Now for some modern day apps such as Discord and Spotify, Discord ran pretty smooth, although this version of Discord is called ARMcord, which specifically targets older legacy systems like Windows 7. And as for Spotify, I can never get it to work because I just always forget my login. But alas, I think I've covered everything I've done and it's time for the outro. Hello everyone, before this video ends, I want to give a shout out to Zephanax and Marcy for helping me out with the voice acting in this video. As for my upload schedule, I'm really sorry that I took such a long time and I promise to be more consistent. Anyways, please join the Discord server and I'll see you all next time.